Okay, we are back with another Automation April episode of App Stories. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Fetici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. We have 4 sponsors for this episode: Collide, Pillow, Drafts, and SourceGraph. We have some guests today. We have a few guests. We are going to have the 2 developers who are working on Pushcut. That is Rodrigo Araújo and his brother Victor, as well as Anders Borum, the maker of Working Copy. Let's dive into the interviews, Federico.
Let's do it.
All right. We are here today with Rodrigo and Victor Araújo. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Hi, guys. It's awesome to be here. Been listening to App Stories for a long while, and it's amazing to be part of it now.
Hi, everyone.
Well, we're really glad to have you.
I'm very excited as well to be talking to you guys. Hello.
Well, why don't I start with you, Rodrigo, and then Victor can chime in. But I want to get a sense for listeners who might not be familiar with Pushcut, because Pushcut is an incredibly powerful utility that really takes shortcuts to a whole different level if you know what you're doing. And I was wondering if you could just kind of give us an overview of what it does and how it kind of addresses some of the limitations of shortcuts itself.
Okay, sure. Just a little bit of clarification here. We're not the actual creators of Pushcut. That was a work from Simon Leib. He's the one that built Pushcut and an awesome job. And from a user perspective, the app is great. And also from a developer point of view, the code is awesomely clean and he did an awesome job. And it's great to be picking up the mantle and continuing to build Pushcut from where he gave it and he passed it to us. So regarding your question, John, we like to think of Pushcut like peeling layers from an onion. So we have the first tier, the first layer. It's about local interaction. So you can use Pushcut to automate notifications and more recently widgets. So you can have actions added to your notifications and they can be triggered locally or based on background actions and something like that. And the widgets can also be used to...
Sorry, Rodrigo. You can also leverage shortcuts automations, right?
Yeah. So you can also leverage shortcuts automation to trigger Pushcut notifications and also change and update the widgets. So maybe we can talk more about the widgets later, but the idea here is that you can have information displayed on your home screen, much like a dashboard. So you can have widgets that change their shapes and their contents throughout the day, and the information inside of them can also be updated based on API calls or shortcut actions and everything like that. So that's the first layer, the basic one, the local layer. Everything happens on your phone and it's automated there. We have a second layer that uses web services. So you can integrate the internet to trigger things on your phone. So you can use IFTTT, if this then that, right? The Zapier and Integromat to trigger notifications and widget changes on your phone. So if you want to automate something based on a trigger that isn't available on Shortcuts, so based on an application that is online or some web service, you can use it and use one of these services, and they will trigger the Pushcut notifications or widget changes on your phone. So it's the internet interacting, moving things on your phone, integrating to your phone. And the third and last layer is the most power user layer. It's the automation server. So you can have a second device running Pushcut automation server, and it will be capable of running automations without confirmation and running shortcuts and enabling HomeKit scenes and all that. So that's something like a quick primer on what Pushcut does. It's basically local interactions, internet interactions, and automation interactions.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Collide. Collide sends employees important, timely, and relevant security recommendations for their Linux, Mac, and Windows devices right inside Slack. Collide is perfect for organizations that care deeply about compliance and security, but don't want to get there by locking down devices to the point where they become unusable. Instead of frustrating your employees, Collide educates them about security and device management while directing them to fix important problems. Visit collide.com/appstories to sign up today. That's KOLIDE.com/appstories. Enter your email when prompted to receive a free Collide gift bundle after trial activation. Collide knows that end users are IT admins' most significant untapped resource and key to solving the most challenging to fix security issues. Issues like instructing developers to set passphrases on unencrypted SSH keys, finding plain text, two-factor backup codes, and teaching end users how to store them securely, convincing employees to uninstall evil browser extensions that may sell their browser history, and a whole lot more. Those are just some of the many use cases not solved by locking down devices. You can try Collide with all of its features on an unlimited number of devices for free for 14 days with no credit card required. Try it out today at collide.com/appstories. That's KOLIDE.com/appstories. Our thanks to Collide for their support of the show.
I think it's awesome how you are with Pushcut. You are effectively sort of creating this bridge between Shortcuts and the outside world, which is not, it's not something that necessarily Apple is doing on its own. And I mean, sure, you can have Shortcuts integrate with HomeKit, and you can manually talk to external APIs. You know, you have the get contents of URL action in Shortcuts, right. But outside events cannot do anything in Shortcuts by default. And that's where Pushcut comes in. And so I wanted to ask you both, and maybe we can ask Victor, as part of the Pushcut team, you must have seen some really interesting examples of how users are actually using Pushcut. And I was kind of wondering if you could give us a few examples of, like, what kind of things have you seen people build with Pushcut? And maybe these examples can also serve as inspiration for other people this month with Automation April going on. So what have you seen people do with Pushcut?
So many of our users, they rely heavily on Pushcut for home automations, right? As you said, what you can do with shortcuts on home automations is still kind of limited on shortcuts. And many of our users rely on the get contents of URL action to trigger some behaviors using automation servers or our webhooks to trigger notifications or run more complex shortcuts with the whole gamma of actions available for the regular shortcuts on the automation server, right? So this is a very widespread use for Pushcut and home automation. I think we have some people covering this on YouTube already, and it's great. It's amazing how we can extend and make home automations more powerful for our users. But I'd like to take this time to also talk about something that was unexpected on this last year that some users of ours actually managed to do. Is, you know how iOS 15 introduced focus modes, right? In these focus modes, they sync between all your devices. And now Apple also made it so that you can use a change of focus mode as a trigger for a personal automation or shortcuts, right? So what some of our users have done is that they use this change of focus mode as a trigger to run a shortcut on a different device. You know, so for example, you can leverage this with the automation server. You have one of our users wanted to run a shortcut based on an Alexa command. So he gave the Alexa command that integrated with IFTTT. IFTTT ran an action on the automation server, and then the automation server triggered the focus mode change that by itself triggered an action on the personal device. That's kind of convoluted, but it's also amazing how you can link all these pieces together and get a very powerful automation, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially because like obviously, the Amazon Echo does not natively integrate with shortcuts at all.
No, and probably never will either, I would think.
Yeah, and when you mention the automation server, I guess that usually this comes down to people leaving, I guess, like a secondary iPad or another device running all the time as the automation server for Pushcut inside the home or inside their office, and that sort of central hub serves as the director of all these automations, right?
Precisely, yeah. Due to the limitations of how we can run background processes on iOS devices, Pushcut, the automation server, must run on a dedicated iOS device. Actually, we haven't a working solution for Mac right now. It's something that we are actively working on. We can talk about this later. It's something we intend to do, is to bring Pushcut's features to the Mac. Since last year, we've got the gift of having shortcuts on the Mac, right? But for now, you'd have to have a secondary iOS device running Pushcut Automation Server on the foreground all the time.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. More and more studies show that getting a good night's sleep can improve your health and well-being in more ways than you can ever imagine. Pillow is a simple app that can help you be more aware of your sleep patterns and make informed decisions to help improve your sleep quality. All you have to do is wear your Apple Watch while you sleep. Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically and give you a full report in the morning. If you want to use Pillow with just your Apple Watch or iPad, you can do that too with the press of a single button before you go to sleep. If you have an Apple Watch, you can also get important information about your heart rate trends, variability, heart rate dip, and blood oxygen levels for each sleep session. You can even record sounds like sleep talking, sleep apnea, snoring, and other noises that might be affecting your sleep at night. If your Apple Watch is a Series 6 or newer, Pillow will also display information about the intensity of the sounds during each sleep session to give you a rating of that exposure. Another valuable aspect of Pillow is helping you make informed decisions to improve your sleep. Pillow comes with a dedicated section to help you discover trends, get personalized insights, sleep tips, and easily compare your sleep metrics to things like your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and other health metrics. If you want to wind down and relax before sleep or listen to something throughout the night, Pillow comes with an expanding collection of sleep aid sounds, guided meditations, bedtime stories, and music produced specifically for sleep. If you have a chance to take a nap during the day, use Pillow's Power Nap mode. Pillow can wake you using your iPhone, Apple Watch, or iPad at the lightest possible sleep stage using its smart alarm feature. Starting with watchOS 6, Pillow's battery consumption is minimal too. Last but not least, Pillow is also very privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data is encrypted and stored on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. You don't need to register or create an account to use Pillow. You can use it completely anonymously, and it doesn't collect or send your personal data anywhere else. Pillow is free to download from the App Store and comes with a set of great features you can use for free every day. If you want to try Pillow's premium features, there's also an option to start a free 7-day trial. Just visit pillow.app to get started today. Again, that URL is pillow.app. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show. I want to ask you a little bit about how you go about designing the Pushcut Shortcuts actions and how they interact with shortcuts, because I think one of the things that we've noticed, especially with Shortcuts utility apps, is that the design of those the actions and the parameters they use is pretty important, and parameters have really taken Shortcuts actions to a whole nother level. What are you doing kind of along those lines with Pushcut these days?
Okay, so yeah, parameters in Shortcuts just took everything from the basic level to a whole full-blown power level that allowed many shortcut utility apps to use the term you coined here in this podcast to flourish. So we have things like Toolbox Pro, Charty, Pushcut, obviously, Logger more recently, and there's so many apps flourishing just because of that idea. So regarding the approach we use to build the actions, Simon has built most of them, but he's been using the same philosophy. It's the one that Apple prioritizes. So the idea is that actions in from third-party apps in Shortcuts should be atomic. So they should try to do one task and one task very well. So and they can also be chained. So the idea is that if you want to build something more complex, you can chain lots of simpler actions, and they will be executed in sequences. It's practically a programming language running inside Shortcuts. Shortcuts is practically a programming language. So the idea here is that the making these actions small and chainable, atomic and chainable, they can be customized and empower the users. So talking about one of the actions we did build, it is the more recent one, the update widgets action. So I don't know if you guys had time to play around with the Pushcut widgets, but the idea here is we have the widget in the home screen, and that is like a container, and you can put any content you'd like inside of it, pre-programmed contents that you built inside the widget creator inside Pushcut. So you can change that based on automations. So you can have the same widget on the same place on the home screen, show you your morning, your daily schedule for in the morning, and then in the afternoon, you would like to see when the sun goes down. So you can change the full content of the full appearance of the widget to make it show that information in the afternoon. And that uses the update widgets action that uses parameters. So you pass the widget, the container you'd like to change, and the content you'd like to put in that. And also, as an optional parameter, the ones that get hidden by the little arrow, you can, inside the shortcut action, you can define a list of inputs. So that's you can give extra content, extra inputs to update the content inside the Pushcut widget. So that's the idea that without parameters in Shortcut, that would be completely impossible. We wouldn't be able to build the widget functionality like we wanted to.
Very nice, very nice. So I guess if any developer is listening, the advice would really be, please consider this modern take on shortcut actions that use parameters, right? Because they're so much more powerful than what shortcut actions used to be before. And unfortunately, I still see so many third-party apps that have like old actions that don't use parameters, that only have like the basic Siri shortcuts, and the modern actions like the ones in Pushcut. That's really the way to go going forward. So I think it's awesome that you guys have been doing this sort of stuff. I would like to ask you both, what would you like to see? We just got the announcement for WWDC, right? It's in 2 months. What would you like to see in terms of the Shortcuts API for developers? What do you want to see in iOS 16 and whatever the next version of macOS is going to be called?
Shortcuts is awesome, and it's been, I think it's the most updated app in iOS, of all system apps. So we've got several updates in point releases since iOS 15. But the point is, things are still kind of rough around Shortcuts. So and it hinders development. So one thing that's really important is to make it more stable. It's gotten a lot better since iOS 15, and I'd like to recognize that the team has been doing an awesome job in the whole migration to SwiftUI. We've been doing that with Pushcut, migrating the app to SwiftUI, and Pushcut is a lot smaller than the whole Shortcuts app. And migrating something from UIKit to SwiftUI is a daunting task. So the team has done an amazing job. Of course, there would be some rough edges, but one thing that's really important for us developers to build and test everything we've been doing is to have it become more stable, which I'm sure that the team will manage to do on iOS 16. Also, I've mentioned the list parameters. You must have noticed that some actions in Shortcuts have the little plus next to the parameters, or when they are displayed in the hidden drawer, you get the green plus sign that can add multiple parameters inside the same parameter. That's kind of a hassle to deal in code. Sometimes that that generates some problems, especially using variables. When you pass variables through that, and sometimes the variables disappear from the UI shortcuts. But we've been finding radars with the team, and of course, when they can get to it, they'll fix that. And I'd love to have more, and that's more of a personal desire than something like a developer. But I'd love to have more power over health actions, and having more options to get things like workout data and sports and the data from the maps. That would be awesome too. And I think that's it.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Drafts. Drafts is more than just another notes app. It gives you a new approach to using your iPhone, iPad, Mac, or Apple Watch because it starts as a low-friction way to capture your thoughts. Drafts launches ready to type. No more fumbling around to find the right app or the right folder to create your note, only to find that you've forgotten what you were doing. Just open and type or dictate, and you'll never lose that thought. Once you've captured your text, the customizable editor gives you a familiar place to hone your thoughts. It comes with great markdown support, tools for arranging lines, your choice of fonts and font sizes, and other editing options that will make Drafts your go-to scratchpad for everything from journals to checklists to drafting emails. And when you're ready to do something with your text, Drafts' powerful actions are there for you. It can send emails, messages, and tweets, and create lists and reminders. Plus, it integrates with hundreds of popular apps and services, making it easy to fit with any workflow, especially when you can make the most of their ready-to-use actions from the Drafts directory or build your own. The possibilities are endless. Drafts is always free to use, so download it today. Try it in your dock for a week. You might find that you can't live without it. And if you want more, unlock the power of themes, workspaces, custom actions, and a whole lot more with Drafts Pro. April 2022 marks the 10th anniversary of Drafts' original release in the App Store. And to celebrate, they're offering new users a full year of Drafts Pro for a fraction of the normal cost. For details, visit getdrafts.com. Again, that URL is getdrafts.com. Our thanks to Drafts for their support of the show. Maybe before we go, I'd like to get a sense from both of you what's next for Pushcut. And maybe Victor, I'll start with you. What can you share with listeners about where Pushcut is heading?
We've just had a huge update, right? Where we brought, as Rodrigo said, a whole new feature for Pushcut, completely different from what you could do before, which was the widgets. There was a lot of work because we ended up putting a whole widget editor inside the app, very customizable, so our users could be really creative and share the widgets with the community and empower them to build beautiful widgets. And we in the short term, we'd like to expand this feature. There's still images support that is lacking, so we'd like to bring that in the near future. And we're also investigating and trying to work out the best way to bring Pushcut to the Mac, as I've said before. So this is huge for us. It's something that we are looking into, and it's very important because it can bring the automation server, for example, to a whole another level, right? Because then we'd not be limited by the app being in the foreground restriction that we have on iOS. Right. So this is something that we are taking a look at and actually investigating on which is the best way to bring Pushcut to the Mac.
Yeah, so many people run a Mac 24/7 that it seems like only a natural for something like your server. That makes a lot of sense to me. How about you, Rodrigo? Anything you want to add?
No, that's just it. Yeah, Pushcut to the Mac is the goal for 2022 for us. But maybe the second semester, I think we might be sharing something about that.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. I want to thank both of you for joining us today. If listeners haven't checked out Pushcut before, definitely go give it a try, because there really are a lot of layers to this app and things that you can accomplish, whether it's locally or using web services or using the server, as Rodrigo explained. So it's well worth your time and checking out. Thanks for joining us, both of you.
Sure, John. Also, if anyone wants to try Pushcut and has any difficulties or doubts, be sure to engage with either of us or the community. We have an awesome community, many people eager to help on Reddit, Automators forums, the whole Shortcuts subreddit. So we highly recommend you to give it a try, to engage with the community and talk to the other users.
Perfect.
Yeah. Shout out to the people at r/Shortcuts. The guys in the subreddit for Shortcuts it's a great community. People there are incredibly supportive, and they've been holding us and helping us for ever since we started building Charty and Pushcut. It's awesome. The people there are really great.
That's terrific. Yeah, it is a great community.
Yeah, and also thank to you guys. You've been pushing Shortcuts boundaries. I'm fairly sure that Apple gives the attention Shortcuts deserve, because actually of the work you guys been doing on Mac Stories and how you've been always trying to do more with Shortcuts. So thanks to you as well.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We are here today with Anders Borum, who is the maker of Working Copy, which is a Git client for iOS and iPadOS, and a great tool for anybody managing a Git repo. And it's interesting to me that it's got such deep Shortcuts integration, because there are a lot of Git tools out there, but there's really not anybody else that I know of doing this kind of deep Shortcuts integration. Could you, Anders, start off by just kind of giving people an overview of what it is that Working Copy does, kind of the use cases for it, and what your Shortcuts actions do, broad brush?
Yeah, okay. So I can try to quickly explain what Git is, so it makes more sense for a Git client.
That's a good idea.
Good luck.
Yeah, so when we're working on a project, we have a bunch of files. You might want to work on some of these files at the same time. And it's easy to sort of, if we just work on a shared directory, the last one to save is sort of that's what's in the file. So it's very easy to override or step over each other's toes.
Right.
So that's the problem that version control tries to solve. And Git is one kind, the most popular kind of version control. So, and what it does is, the project it's a directory, sometimes with a lot of files, sometimes with a few. And instead of working on the same directory, everybody works on a copy. And when they complete some task, or whether write a new file or fix typos, they describe the change they made with maybe a single line, maybe a few lines. And then at that point in time, with this explanation, and we know who did this work, that's what's called a commit. And it's sort of, this is just, it's there, it's safe. And when everybody does this, there's all these problems of overriding and who did what, and it just becomes very easy to answer these questions. There's very little risk of sort of work getting lost. And Working Copy is just that on iOS, really. So you get this, you get the project directories, you can make changes, you can do these commits, and then you push them to a server, and this is how sort of the commits need to be combined, and we end up with hopefully a good shared project where we didn't step over each other's toes. And I think it has such extensive shortcut support because most of the users are developers. So it's super, version control and Git. It's useful when you're sort of writing regularly, but it's essential when you're writing software. So with the users being almost all of them developers, they have maybe they've pushed a bit for it started out being callback URL support and then shortcut support when this was introduced. So I would say that the users they are forcing me.
In a good way, I guess. Yes, they are.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm a user myself as well, so I'm also I'm easy to push in this direction.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been using working copy forever, really. I've been using working copy for, I want to say, 6 years, maybe since the first version. It really changed how I think about how I share. I'm not a programmer, I don't write code, but I share markdown text. And as long as it's text, you can issue your commits and you can diff the differences between two versions of the same files, of the same file. And it's ideal to work in a team and compare drafts of or markdown text like that.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by SourceGraph. These days, every company needs to be a tech company because there's so much code to deal with. It's hard to have any kind of online presence or digital service without copious amounts of code. And code affects everyone. It's the foundation of the technology we use every single day. But handling big databases can be tricky, especially when you think about the volume and variety of code. So thankfully, SourceGraph is here to solve all of your company's code-related headaches. They're tackling big code. More than ever, companies need resources to increase developer velocity, to give people what they need to be agile, innovative, and productive. With SourceGraph, developers can figure out how to use a particular function, find and solve problems more quickly, identify what impact a code change will have on dependencies, and a whole lot more. SourceGraph is the future of how companies are built, and it's powering the infrastructure of today's most successful, high-growth businesses, including 3 out of 5 of the biggest tech companies. SourceGraph's current customers include PayPal, Uber, Plaid, Reddit, Atlassian, and many others. If your company uses code, you need SourceGraph. Go to about.sourcegraph.com. That's about.sourcegraph.com to find out why some of the biggest tech companies in the world use SourceGraph and to see what it can do for yours. Our thanks to SourceGraph for their support of the show.
One of the things I love about working copy is the shortcuts integration really runs deep. What I want to ask you about is the fact that you're taking advantage of all kinds of shortcuts actions. You have your native actions, the ones that can be configured with parameters, but you also have your Siri suggestions, right? You're using both of them at the same time. And I was kind of wondering if you could go a little bit in detail on why are you doing this and what are the advantages of both approaches?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think some of it is historical. So the Siri suggestions, this came a year before sort of the fully powered shortcuts actions with parameters. You can see in what direction the wind is blowing, and I wished for more at the time, but this was what we had, and it is useful to be able to sort of repeat the things you do often and activate this with voice. But I think compared to the action with parameters, that sees the heavy usage from the working copy users.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's funny because working copy, Federico's right. It does play an awful large role at Mac Stories because, especially with the newsletters we do, Federico and I are working independently on all sorts of articles for our newsletters, and that's probably at the end of the day about a dozen different documents, and we're working on those independently. And then as we kind of finalize and do our final commits with some notes for the other person, we each kind of drop in, sync up, and look at each other's work and make our own edits, and then have the ability to go through with the versioning history to kind of see what the changes are that have been made. So it's been a real help for us in that kind of ability to hook it into Discord too, where we get we can see the notifications of when something's committed, and without having to do a lot of back and forth over iMessage or something, see what the other person is working on. Super handy for that situation, but also I think I can imagine has to be very useful for developers that way too. And I guess I want to ask, kind of along those lines, what are some of the interesting use cases that you've seen for the action for I guess working copy in general, but also in particular its shortcuts?
Yeah, so actually the most interesting use of shortcuts in combination with working copy, it isn't even exactly the working copy action. So I had a user that, so of course you can activate shortcuts from the share sheet, and these shortcuts, they can output files or text or something like that. And working copy will it will feed in the file you're sharing. And when you get back the result, it will, if it looks like this could be file content, it will write this back. And I had a user that would validate and fix HTML through a web service by going through a shortcut from within the app. And I think I had never, ever imagined a use case like that. So I think that was interesting. But I think sort of the actions that shortcuts makes available, they are often used to fill in, I would say, some of the gaps that people want to use Git in very specific ways. There are so many ways to do it, and working copy would be even more complicated. It would be a sort of daunting app to look at if it needed to support all of this sort of in the app itself. And the shortcuts then allows people to work with working copy in their own custom way. So they have maybe, it becomes a little technical, but that's sort of branching models where each time you work on maybe a problem or a task, you make a new branch and you work along this branch, and you have to call it something specific, maybe tied into your task manager. And they can do this through the shortcut support.
So Anders, I want to ask you, how do you feel about the arrival of shortcuts on macOS Monterey?
Yeah, so I'm super excited about that. I've always felt that there are a lot of good Git clients on the Mac, and of course I want as many users of the app as I can get, but it wasn't obvious to me that sort of what working copy is doing. It makes a lot of sense on the iPad and the iPhone, but a lot of stuff had to be different for it to be sort of a natural Mac app. Even though I can run it personally and sort of and test things out, but then having the shortcuts I'm using and having them just work on the Mac, it's making me sort of extra hungry about making working copy ready for the Mac.
So on the one hand, you're not sure if you want to bring it to the Mac, but on the other, you have your shortcuts, and that makes you feel like, maybe I should bring working copy to them.
Yeah. So I absolutely want to bring it to the Mac. So it's a question of some of the things that only make sense in sort of an iOS context.
Right.
They need to be rewritten, and that takes time, of course. So, but I was surprised that I can just run the same shortcuts and they just work. It's so impressive.
And I mean, you have some experience with shortcuts now, because in addition to working copy, you've done the work with Secure Shellfish as well for all the shortcuts integration that you have there. You must be one of the leading experts when it comes to shortcuts actions with parameters and also the file provider integration, right? Because you've done the work for both apps. So I kind of feel like you are in a unique position here for this question. Like, what advice would you give, considering that Automation April is going on and we have an audience of shortcuts users, but also developers listening, right? Mm-hmm. What kind of advice would you give to other developers who may be designing or considering shortcuts integration in their apps?
Yeah, so I think some of the things I've learned through the years, when you make the shortcuts actions, they take input and they produce output, and this can be it can be symbols, it can be strings or numbers, dates, or it can be sort of your own complicated types. It could be sort of maybe a commit could be something with the message you wrote and the author that did it and the date and the content. So it can be these types can be quite complicated, and so my advice to developers would be to make the input types the simple types, and then make the output that can be these complex, rich types.
Yes.
Because then you can. It's much easier to sort of use variables. It's much easier to use the actions in different ways when the input parameters are simple. Yeah. I've had some actions in. I made the mistake in Secure Shellfish first, where I could just see this could be much more powerful with more simple sort of plain input types. Right. But the moment that you have a bunch of users and they have shortcuts and they are working, and it becomes very hard to change. Or it's not something I do lightly, at least. So it took sort of months to slowly switch to sort of new actions.
And you gotta deprecate your previous actions, which thankfully now in shortcuts you see when an action has been deprecated and a new version is available. But yeah, I can imagine that must be a ton of work to just say, okay, out with the old, and in comes a new action. Before we wrap up, Anders, I want to ask you, WWDC in a couple of months, right? Mm-hmm. So what would you like to see as a developer of two apps that really deeply integrate with shortcuts? Anything specific you would like to see Apple address?
Yes. So
I imagine you have some wishes.
Yeah. But the most important thing is that right now, the actions provided by third-party apps like mine, they are restricted in the amount of time they have. So I have to tell the Shortcuts app sort of whether it worked or not, and what the result of the action is within 10 seconds. And a lot of the things I want to do, sometimes they take longer, or maybe they always take longer. And there are some shortcuts that I would have loved to, some actions that I think they are useful. I think they should be included, but they would just time out all the time. So I'm hoping for maybe some way to perhaps not just turn up the amount of time, but maybe a way for shortcuts to say, this is a long-running operation, some way to report progress, or something. It could open up a lot of things.
Yeah. I've seen that sort of request from more than one developer, so it's not just you. Well, Anders, obviously we are huge fans of Working Copy and Secure Shellfish. I'm so happy we were able to get you on this segment of this App Stories episode. And of course, people can go check out Working Copy, Secure Shellfish on the App Store. I'm keen to see what you will work on after WWDC for iOS 16 and iPadOS, and maybe as well macOS, as you mentioned. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for all your work on Mac Stories, on automation.
Thank you.
All right. That was a great conversation, Federico. I really enjoyed talking to those developers about shortcuts because I really feel like there is so much that can be done with shortcuts, and both Pushcut and Working Copy are two of the better examples, I think, of power user apps that people can get a lot out of. I want to remind everybody, too, that the Automation April contest is still going on all the way through April 20th. You can submit your shortcuts, up to 2 of them, for consideration by our judges. Just go to shortcuts.macstories.net to enter the contest. You'll find all the details there, the rules, how to submit, and everything right there. So check it out. There's also a post on macstories.net with all the details. I want to thank our 4 sponsors again for this episode. That's Collide, Pillow, Drafts, and SourceGraph. You can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he is at Vitici. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.